Hello and welcome to LiCAS.News Weekly Wrap. I am Maria Losenio.
And I am Basilio Sepe, and these are our headlines this week.
The Vatican renews a controversial deal with China on the ordination of bishops.
Pope Francis stirs controversy with a statement on civil union law to cover gay people.
Philippine bishops call for probe into the influx of Chinese retirees in the country.
Regional legislators urge the Association of Southeast Asian Nations to act on the worsening Rohingya crisis.
In Cambodia, flooding brings trouble to people in Phnom Penh.
Thailand's Prime Minister asks for review of TV station suspension amid protests.
A new human rights report says North Korea treats detainees less than an animal.
Hong Kong activist Grandma Wong says she was held in mainland China for 14 months.
And now to our stories. The Vatican has renewed this week a controversial provisional agreement with China on the appointment of Catholic bishops. The initial application has been positive thanks to the good communication and cooperation between the parties, read a statement from the Holy See press office. The agreement calls for China to formally recognize the Pope's authority within the Church, while the Vatican in turn recognized the legitimacy of bishops previously appointed by Beijing. Catholics in China are emerging from more than half a century of division that saw them split between a state-backed official church and a non-official underground church that remained loyal to Rome. The provisional agreement, which was signed in Beijing on September 22, 2018 and went into effect a month later, expired this week. The Holy See said it intends to pursue an open and constructive dialogue for the benefit of the life of the Catholic Church and the good of Chinese people. In a statement, the Holy See said the two parties evaluated various aspects of the agreement's application and have agreed to prolong the term for another 2 years until October 22, 2022. The deal has been highly contested by the U.S. State Department and some Catholics who say the Vatican has sold out to the communist government.
Pope Francis' statement expressing openness to the idea of creating a law that will legally cover homosexual people has stirred mixed reactions fueled by various media interpretations. The pontiff's brief comments in the documentary film Francesco was reported by several news outlets as departing from the position of the Vatican's doctrinal office and the Pope's predecessors on the issue. The Pope's direct call for civil union laws represents a shift from the perspective of his predecessors and from his own more circumspect positions on civil unions in the past, according to a report from Catholic News Agency. The Pope's latest pronouncement, however, was not a departure from earlier remarks he made about civil union laws that can provide legal protection for couples in long-term committed relationships. Homosexual people have a right to be in a family. They are children of God and have a right to a family, said Pope Francis in the film that premiered in Rome on October 21. Nobody should be thrown out or be made miserable over it. What we have to create is a civil union law, that way they are legally covered, he said. In previous pronouncements, the pontiff repeatedly said that parents should not and must not disown a child who is gay, and on several occasions, he spoke about the rights all people have to have a family.
Several Catholic bishops in the Philippines called on authorities to investigate the reported influx into the country of Chinese retirees who are mostly in their 30s. Bishop Jose Colin Bagaforo of Kidapawan, head of the social action arm of the Bishops' Conference, said the government should take a closer look into the phenomenon. He said authorities must question why the so-called Chinese retirees are mostly 35 years old. This is a security issue. We wonder why the Philippine military is not alarmed on this, he said. The country's legislators have earlier expressed alarm over the large number of young Chinese retirees who have been allowed to enter the country. Data from the Philippine Retirement Authority showed that the country permitted the stay of 27,678 Chinese retirees who are mostly only 35 years old. Bishop Roderick Pabilio, Apostolic Administrator of the Archdiocese of Manila, said these young Chinese retirees are more a threat to our country than the Filipino communists, the political activists, and the member of the opposition in the government.
Regional legislators urged the Association of Southeast Asian Nations to act on the worsening Rohingya crisis. A group of Southeast Asian legislators called on the Association of Southeast Asian Nations this week to step up its response to the worsening crisis in Myanmar's Rakhine State. The ASEAN Parliaments for Human Rights urged the regional body to ensure it actually helps end the cycle of violence and displacement. The legislators noted that Myanmar continues to demonstrate no desire to solve the protracted issues or restore the rights of the Rohingya. They also cited what they described as ASEAN's reluctance to address the worsening crisis, saying the region's chronic lack of leadership has led to an uneasing cycle of violence and displacement. APHR urged the regional body to act in spite of Myanmar's continuous demonstration of unwillingness to solve the Rohingya issue. The plight of the Rohingya is not only a stain on our region but on all of humanity, said Charles Santiago, a Malaysian member of the parliament and chairman of APHR.
Cambodia has been subjected to heavy rains and floods since early October, so far killing at least 25 people while affecting over 240,000 according to local media. In Phnom Penh, several districts have been hit as water levels and rivers have risen significantly. Aid agencies and the government have been providing aid to those affected by flooding in the country. The church's social arm in the country, Caritas Cambodia, is currently assessing how they can assist over the long term those affected by the floods. Many organizations are already providing emergency aid so we can do different things, said Haun Kosal, a Caritas project coordinator in Battambang. We're now mapping the disaster area and collecting information about the damage. If victims don't get any help yet, we will give it, he said.
Thailand's Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha has said he has asked Thai police to review a court decision to suspend an online TV station critical of the government. Voice TV had also been found to have breached the Computer Crime Act by uploading false information, said ministry spokesman Putchapong Nat Taisong. Thailand has drawn criticism from rights groups for banning demonstrations and the publication of news seen as damaging by the government as it tries to end the protests against Prayuth and the powerful monarchy. Thai officials earlier said that 3 other media organizations are under investigation. Voice TV is owned in part by the Shinawatra family of former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra and his sister Yingluck, who was overthrown by Prayuth in a 2014 coup. Street protests since mid-July are the biggest challenge in decades to monarchy under King Maha Vajiralongkorn and to Prayuth, who rejects accusations of engineering an election last year to keep power.
North Korea has been imposing dangerous and inhumane policies in its pretrial detention system that lacks any semblance of due process, said a new report from Human Rights Watch. The US-based human rights watchdog released on October 19 a report titled Worth Less Than an Animal, Abuses and Due Process Violations in Pretrial Detention in North Korea. Brad Adams, HRW's Asia director, described North Korea's pretrial detention and investigation system as arbitrary, violent, cruel, and degrading. North Korean sources say they live in constant fear of being caught in a system where official procedures are usually irrelevant, guilt is presumed, and the only way out is through bribes and connections, he said. The 88-page report focused on the country's treatment of detainees who are considered to be worth less than an animal in its pretrial detention facilities. The report described North Korea with a weak legal and institutional framework. It also highlighted corruption within the country's judicial and law enforcement system.
A Hong Kong protester dubbed Grandma Wong said that Chinese authorities kept her in custody for a month and a half across the border in Shenzhen, where she allegedly suffered mental abuse and then prevented from coming back for over a year. Alessandra Wong, 64, had been a familiar face at pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong last year, often waving a large British flag, but she disappeared from the streets around August last year. Speaking to media last week, Wong said she had been detained by Chinese police when she tried to return to her home in Shenzhen on August 14, 2019. During about 1.5 months detention at various centers where up to 26 people would sleep in a room of less than 200 square feet, Wong said she was being interrogated almost every day about the Hong Kong protests. Until earlier this month, Wong had been restricted by authorities from returning to Hong Kong, pending a trial that never took place in the end. She stayed in her home in Shenzhen where she would get regular visits by the national security officers, she added. That's all for this week. I am Basilio Sepe.
And again, I am Maria Luceño for LiCAS.News, your independent Catholic news source in Asia. For more stories across Asia, visit our website at LiCAS.News and follow us on Twitter and like our page on Facebook.